Hello again, and welcome back to year 4 of the Religious Education Initiative. This is week 30, day 1. Last time we saw King Saul consult a medium, asking her to inquire of Samuel what would happen in the coming battle with the Philistines. To the shock of the medium, Samuel actually came when she summoned him, and he told Saul exactly the same thing that he had told him before, that God had forsaken him because he, Saul, had forsaken God, and that Saul and his sons would die in battle the next day. We then saw David try to march with the Philistines as they went to battle, but they turned him back, not trusting him to fight on their side and expecting that he would turn against them in the course of the battle. This time we will see what happens to David after this, and we will see the final end of King Saul. So this is chapter 30. Now when David and his men came to Ziklag on the 3rd day, the Amalekites had made a raid on the Negev and on Ziklag. They had attacked Ziklag, burned it down, and taken captive the women and all who were in it, both small and great. They killed none of them, but carried them off and went their way. When David and his men came to the city, they found it burned down, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him raised their voices and wept until they had no more strength to weep. David's 2 wives also had been taken captive, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David was in great danger, for the people spoke of stoning him, because all the people were bitter in spirit for their sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. David said to the priest Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, "Bring me the ephod." So Abiathar brought the ephod to David. David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I pursue this band? Shall I overtake them?" He answered him, "Pursue, for you shall surely overtake, and shall surely rescue." So David set out, he and the 600 men who were with him. They came to the Wadi Besor, where those stayed who were left behind. But David went on with the pursuit, he and 400 men. 200 stayed behind, too exhausted to cross the Wadi Besor. In the open country they found an Egyptian and brought him to David. They gave him bread, and he ate. They gave him water to drink. They also gave him a piece of fig cake and 2 clusters of raisins. When he had eaten, his spirit revived, for he had not eaten bread or drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. Then David said to him, "To whom do you belong? Where are you from?" He said, "I am a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite. My master left me behind because I fell sick 3 days ago. We had made a raid on the Negev of the Cherethites, and on that which belongs to Judah, and on the Negev of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag down." David said to him, "Will you take me down to this raiding party?" He said, "Swear to me by God that you will not kill me or hand me over to my master, and I will take you down to them." When he had taken him down, they were spread out all over the ground, eating and drinking and dancing, because of the great amount of spoil they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. David attacked them from twilight until the evening of the next day. Not one of them escaped, except 400 young men who mounted camels and fled. David recovered all that the Amalekites had taken, and David rescued his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, whether small or great, sons or daughters, spoil or anything that had been taken. David brought back everything. David also captured all the flocks and herds which were driven ahead of the other cattle. People said, "This is David's spoil." Then David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to follow David, and who had been left at the Wadi Besor. They went out to meet David and to meet the people who were with him. When David drew near to the people, he saluted them. Then all the corrupt and worthless fellows among the men who had gone with David said, "Because they did not go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we have recovered, except that each man may take his wife and children and leave." But David said, "You shall not do so, my brothers, with what the Lord has given us. He has preserved us and handed over to us the raiding party that attacked us. Who would listen to you in this matter? For the share of the one who goes down into the battle shall be the same as the share of the one who stays by the baggage. They shall share alike." From that day forward, he made it a statute and an ordinance for Israel. It continues to the present day. When David came to Ziklag, he sent part of the spoil to his friends, the elders of Judah, saying, "Here is a present for you from the spoil of the enemies of the Lord." It was for those in Bethel, in Ramoth of the Negev, in Jatir, in Aroer, in Siphmoth, in Eshtemoa, in Rakal, in the towns of the Jerachmeelites, in the towns of the Kenites, in Hormach, in Bor Ashan, in Atach, in Hebron, all the places where David and his men had roamed. Now, the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled before the Philistines, and many fell on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines overtook Saul and his sons, and the Philistines killed Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, the sons of Saul. The battle pressed hard upon Saul. The archers found him, and he was badly wounded by them. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and thrust me through with it, so that these uncircumcised may not come and thrust me through and make sport of me." But his armor-bearer was unwilling, for he was terrified. So Saul took his own sword and fell upon him. When his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell upon his sword and died with him. So Saul and his 3 sons and his armor-bearer and all his men died together on the same day. When the men of Israel who were on the other side of the valley and those beyond the Jordan saw that the men of Israel had fled and that Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook their towns and fled, and the Philistines came and occupied them. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip the dead, they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. They cut off his head, stripped off his armor, and sent messengers throughout the land to the Philistines to carry the good news to the houses of their idols and to the people. They put his armor in the temple of Astarte, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. But when the inhabitants of Jabesh-Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men set out, traveled all night long, and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan. They came to Jabesh and burned them there. Then they took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree in Jabesh, and fasted 7 days. Okay, so on the one hand, this is really just the narrative. David has come back from being rejected by the Philistine army, being refused, as he's willing, apparently, to go with them to fight against Saul, but they don't want him to go, so he gets back to his home in the nick of time to find that all of his people, all of his family, all of the families of his men have been taken and captured by this raiding party. So he inquires of the Lord, asks if he should go after them. The Lord says yes, so he goes after them. He brings them all back. But meanwhile, Saul has been killed, and his sons, including Jonathan, have all been killed in this battle. Saul, we see, actually kills himself. He falls on his own sword. And in this way, not because God is not merciful to Saul, God gives Saul so very many chances, but Saul finally brings upon himself the end that has been coming every time he rejects and disobeys God, every time that he rejects the blessings and the gifts of God, every time he gives himself over to anger and violence and jealousy. This is Saul's judgment day. But we see as kind of a silver lining to this, we see the men of Jabesh-Gilead, that they remember, because way back when Saul first began to rule, which at this point would be 40 years before, the first thing that Saul does as king is he leads the armies of Israel to rescue the people of Jabesh-Gilead who are being attacked and threatened with a half-blinding and enslavement by the king of Ammon. And Saul marches the army through the night to rescue them in the very nick of time. And so we see that they remember, and even though they can't save Saul, even though they can't bring him back, nonetheless they rescue his body from being displayed, and they give him proper burial. Now, burning them is probably because at this point they're badly decayed, and burning is seen as a way of showing some respect. It's not normal. This is very unusual, actually. The Hebrews did not burn their dead as the Christians do not burn their dead. But the men of Jabesh-Gilead, they remember and they honor the Lord's anointed. Even after his fall, even after his many failures, they say thank you. And they fast for 7 days, even as they had waited 7 days 40 years before for Saul to come and save them from slavery. So, this is not a happy ending, but it is a fitting ending. So with that, God bless you all. We'll see you next time for day 2, and next week we'll see where the story of David continues from here. So, God bless.